Okay, I'm back again in Project 2002, and today's video is going to be about my favorite combination of classes and one I've been kind of working towards for a while. So what I'm doing is I've got on my left panel is my Ranger, the right panel is my Necro. Excuse me, we're in Overthere. And basically what I'm doing in this group is a hybrid of root riding and fear kiting. Basically, the way Necromancer works is you do your spells, your spell damage by using damage over time spells. They're highly efficient. The problem on damage over time spells is in a group they usually don't do full damage. So the Necromancer spells are basically geared towards high efficiency but solo. So generally a Necro works best in a smaller group unless you're fighting like really tough mobs that have lots and lots of hit points. So basically when you're soloing as a Necro, you spend quite a bit of your time pulling. And pulling is something that detracts from your mana regeneration, which you need mana regeneration to cast really powerful DOTs. So, the reason behind using this combination is my Ranger has track, he has snare, and he has grasping roots. And from top to bottom, basically, my pull order, or the order of my actions, I guess I should say, is I'm using my Ranger to pull, I snare, bring the mob to the camp, I root it, then with my Necro, I cast, in this case I'm using Venom of the Snake. Venom of the Snake is an awesome spell. I love it because it does high per tick dot damage, has a 42-second duration, and a pretty low mana cost. So it's just a really outstanding spell. And in this case, it works just perfectly because my Ranger's root spell isn't going to last for very long. So what's going to happen is I'm going to root the mob. I cast Venom of the Snake on it. As soon as root breaks, I send in my pet. I cast Fear and sit my Necro back down, and then from there my Ranger can jump in and help finish off the mob while it's feared. The Ranger doesn't take any damage. Really nobody takes any damage. Sometimes root will break and the mob will come in and do a little bit of meleeing, but generally you don't take much damage. So here we go. I've snared, pulled, rooted. Now my Necro is putting down Venom of the Snake. And then we're just going to wait for root to break. My Ranger isn't using much mana, but I use this as an opportunity to have him med while we're waiting for root to break. One of the important parts of fear kiting is the duration on fear. You generally want to hold off on fear until as late as possible in the fight, so that once fear lands, by the time it wears off, the mob has given up. Basically, it's in run mode. So now I'm fearing, jump on my Ranger, and when you fear kite, generally you just go from kind of from behind like a rogue, but you can strafe along as well because mobs like to do quick changes in direction like he just did, and it's, if you're behind it, you don't always have a good view of the action, and you'll miss swings. It'll go out of range and stuff, or out of sight. I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit here. It was raining earlier, and man, rain just it's just way loud. So here again, I mean, mechanically, it really is not complicated. You know, I'm pulling, rooting, putting down venom of the snake, and then it's just a matter of waiting for root to break, then fear, jump in, finish it off. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's very simple. And I don't know, over there tends to be a fairly like mob rich zone. It just sometimes it seems like you'll look forever and can't find something close to you. Where I'm at is right close to the outpost, and like the mobs are basically the lowest level mobs that you get for over there. These are like level 30 to 32 mobs. Like there's no tigers, there's no stone gazers, there's no whatever the highest spiked succulents. There's none of those. It's all the low level versions of all of the mobs here. But it's very clean. I mean, you have the combination of the Necro's high efficiency, long term DOT damage. You have the raw melee damage of the Ranger, and no healing. So basically, I'm not committing a group spot to a healer. And if I did have a healer, they wouldn't be healing. I'd have them doing damage, whether it was nuking or dotting. I'd have the healer do damage. And also, you'll notice I'm not using Call of Bones. Like the Necromancer's Lich spells are hugely important, but generally I find, at least in this level range, because of your life tap abilities, if you don't have a group mate who's casting regen on you, you kind of get into a cycle of constantly life tapping, and you lose your efficiency. And there gets to a point where you're just life tapping on every single pull just to try and get your hit points back. And if you'll notice, like, I'm pulling at a pretty reasonable rate for a duo group. And my Necro is up to very close to 100% mana by the time my Ranger brings back another mob. And like I was talking about before, the mob density here is pretty darn high. So it's almost like a buffet. I mean, I don't have to run very far. Like I don't even like I have track and it's useful. And if I was looking for particular mobs or just there weren't any visually, excuse me, track would be really great to as a pooling tool. And in other zones at higher level, in some of the places deeper into Kunark, Velius, wherever I wind up hunting, obviously track is going to be useful. But out here, the mobs are so close, so you almost don't even need it. But it, after besides track, it still goes back to the ranger skill set of having Spirit of Wolf, which is huge for pulling anywhere, snare, and root. And the snare is important too because necromancers have snare, but because it has a damage component added to it, to be balanced, it has a higher mana cost. So generally, a necromancer doesn't rely on his darkness spells for damage. It's purely for root, and I'm sorry, for snare. And I would say most necros, if they could choose, would prefer to have a lower mana cost, low resist snare that doesn't do any damage, as opposed to the darkness line of spells that do damage but cost more mana and are more prone to resist. And if my ranger gets his snare gets resisted, it's it's meaningless. It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of it. Plus, my ranger has root as well, so I'm using his root for like the opening portion where we're basically root rotting, sort of just to get the fight started. And necromancers have root. I have root at level 34. You have to wait quite a while to get it, but I really don't need it. It's because of the ranger skill set, and the ranger is the only mob that has this combination of abilities. Like a druid can snare. The problem is that your damage is also mana dependent. If it like your damage has come from DOTs or direct damage spells, which means you have to med. So you don't really get much med time. You get a little bit of med time in this group combination, but I don't know if you have enough to really do very much medding to get enough mana to do much damage. Whereas the ranger, he's got melee damage. It's basically free damage. His root, snare, and spirit of wolf are almost free, and they're hugely important to fear kiting. So let's see, Shadow Knights. Now Shadow Knights get snare, but they don't get root, and they don't get track. So it's like, and they don't get spirit of wolf, which is also huge. So let's see, paladins, no spirit of wolf, no snare. All you really get that's useful is root. So really, the ranger I would say is the most optimal class to pair up to a necromancer. I mean, really. Now I would say I did do a video about doing a necro and beast lord combination, and it does work. Don't get me wrong; it works, actually works very, very well, because you don't really have to do any fear kiting. But there's also the issue of the necro or the beast lord's damage output is balanced to be between his pet and his melee attacks. And if you're not fear kiting, in order to do your melee damage, you're going to have to get into melee range of the mob, and it's going to hurt. So basically, you're creating a need for a healer. So really, I think overall, you just can't beat this combination for raw damage. I mean, and it's all about taking the mechanics of classic EverQuest and working them together. See, now here I got a quick break on root, and I cast Flame Lick on my ranger to try and get aggro back towards them, which kind of worked. Then I cast Fear on my necro, and basically nobody got hit because of that quick root break. And like this pet, I'm not sure about dual wield rules on this server. Like, there was a point where pets would auto dual wield even if they didn't have weapons. And it sure looked to me like earlier my pet wasn't doing very good damage. And so I went and bought a few rusty daggers for it. But I couldn't, it's really hard to tell. Unless you're parsing, I couldn't see a huge difference in damage increase after I armed the pet. My ranger's quite well geared. I won't lie. I mean, he's got a haste item, silver shitting wrist hand wraps, and he's got very good melee weapons. So his damage output is good, and that's really the point of it, is that I need to take advantage of this free damage I can get from fear kiting. So the ranger really needs to have pretty good gear. But melee weapons on this server, you can get really good swords, one-handers for like anywhere between 200 to 400 platinum, no problem. I mean, you can, like what I've got, I didn't spend very much money on. Actually, I've got a piercing weapon I'm using that I bought for like, I think it was like 2 copper or something off a vendor, but it has 15 strength. It's like it drops in Luckland. I believe in Maiden's Eye, if I remember right. off of a named mob. But apparently vendors don't see much value in it for some reason. And I got lucky and bought it pretty early on after I started my ranger. And I know a lot of people don't like fear kiting, and I understand why people don't. But if if the mob is like the more hurt a mob is, the slower it's going to run while feared. So because I have this root riding portion ahead of casting fear, the mob's hit points are down. So when I do cast fear and I start fear kiting, following along on my ranger, the mob isn't running as fast as it could be. So and it's gradually going to get slower and slower until it just completely stops once it gets down to around 20% life. And just root, venom of the snake. Just let it cook for a little bit. That was a good root. I just hop on the ranger. It's already half dead, and just finish it off. The only the only little problem about hunting here is right now the Zims are basically all dungeons, which that the Zims change on P2002 about every 90 days. So they're probably due up for a change, probably November. But right now, I'm basically getting the base experience from hunting in Overthere. But the pools are so fast, and it's just like unlimited mobs that sometimes you go into a higher Zim zone and you just run out of mobs to pull. In a small group, that usually isn't too big of a problem, but at the same time, I don't have to do any splitting. There's no crowd control needed. It's just pull and burn. Just pull and burn, pull and burn, pull and burn. It's so easy. Well, anyway, I don't know if I really have much to add, but that's how you do it. Ranger and Necromancer. It's a very satisfying, fun to play, um, and very active type of class combination. So for all you boxers out there, or even people who are still on P99 and want a highly efficient leveling combination, try it. It's fun. I guarantee it. Anyway, that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching, and I will be back in not too long to add more videos.